Okay, this is Bart Sharp, and we're doing the class Releasing Sadness, Depression, and Fears in this time. Um, yeah, I think sadness is always the emotion that most people want to avoid more than anything. And most of the time when we think of depression, we're saying anger not expressed. But also there's a huge matrix of sadness or depression going on due to sadness. It all becomes very convoluted, and I don't think you can really directly say that all depression is anger repressed. There's lots of stuff going on with depression, and we pick it up from various sources. And at this time, sadness and depression are prevalent because it's kind of what's going on in the matrix right now. A lot of people are sad right now for a variety of reasons. And this leads us to more depressed states, particularly if you have had a history with depression. A lot of people with depression go in cycles anyway. And when they're in their low spots in life, they had their bouts with depression. Also, this is a really important concept, is there is a big matrix of an energy going on, a collective consciousness, so to speak, of sadness and depression, because so many people are reacting to the times right now. In other words, if we were at war, and I keep on thinking of what it must have been like for the French during World War II, where their country was overrun, they became a passive participant to the Germans, and they went into probably a lot of states of sadness and depression because they just had to shut everything down. And what happens is, like, if everybody's thinking like that, they don't even need to really talk to each other. It's a vibration that just goes out. And what we had to realize about our own body is this: you are a psychic sponge. In other words, you're picking up energies all over the place. For some people, their radius of their energetic embodiment, generally goes out half a mile. There's some people that go out 5 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles. And then there's those rare individuals, and they're very rare, that maybe their energy goes out to the size of the whole country of Australia. And I know a woman like that. And and I want to just bring her up because she can teach us some valuable lessons. And this is, I met her when I first started Access, and she was an amazing psychic. And she was amazingly overweight. I mean, big, like 300 pounds. And young woman, 25 years old. But was an amazing psychic, and she had a really good livelihood as a psychic. She was very powerful. But when she started interacting with the Access community, she realized that all the thoughts, I'll say this, all the thoughts she was picking up were not hers. She had not realized her energy went out as big as Australia. So why did she gain all the weight? To protect herself from all the sensations she was feeling. And so it was really pretty overwhelming for her most of her life. She was feeling all of these things that did not make sense. And it's because she was picking it up from other people. And, as big as Australia is, that means that she was picking up probably 25 million people's energies. She's picking up a lot of that. And so she was instructed to go on a 3-day exercise where she would say, who does this belong to every thought she had. And it would start disconnecting herself from all the thought matrices she was connected to. And she did it. I mean, and it's really hard because if you can think about it, if you say, who does this belong to every thought you have for 3 days, it basically means you're saying it constantly, like every 8 seconds. I've done it. It's really, you have to have some really strong motivation inside of you to do it. But what happened was she disconnected from all those thoughts. She felt enormously free, and she lost 100 pounds within a month. And she could do things that she never thought she'd ever get to do again. So this is a really good tool to use is whenever you feel something inside of you that doesn't feel right, say, who does this belong to? And what will happen is the thought will generally dissolve. It'll go away. Because most of your thoughts are connected to various other things. And so in this time and age, it's really important. You know, for me, when I'm in Austin, Texas, I live in Southwest Austin, it feels very peaceful. But there's certain days I feel lots of fear, lots of sadness, lots of various other things. And the first thing I have to realize is that it's not mine. You know, it's almost like, you know, you ever had those days where you just wake up on the wrong side of the bed, so to speak, and you go, gee, everything just looks so crappy today. I'm not too happy. Most likely, somebody in your neighborhood or varieties of people are having a really bad day, and you're picking it up. So this is your first exercise to do, is say, who does this belong to whatever shows up in your body? Because right now, the collective consciousness of what's going on in the country is confusing. I think, is that kind of a consensus? Just shake your head if you say, yeah, when I look at the newspaper or Facebook or however I connect to the world, it just seems really confusing. To me, that's kind of how it is. I get so many messages out there, so many things, and it can be overwhelming. It's just like, what's going to happen? What's the truth? Are we really making the right choice? And so it's best to be able to have tools to disconnect from that matrix. And saying things like, is this energy really mine, or who's this belong to, helps you disconnect from it. And it doesn't mean that all your issues are resolved. You know, it could be that when you start to feel this sadness inside of you, or a depression about what's happening, there's the world outside of you that's affecting you, but also you have something reflecting it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be stimulating you so much. So there is there's two issues here going on at the same time. And it's always good to keep aware of that. Because who does this belong to helps tremendously, but there's also a deeper story with that. And so, if the who does this belong to isn't working and you're still having sadness and depression, you may go, okay, so this is really my personal story. There's really something deeper in there that's been triggered and it's active, and I need to deal with it. So much about sadness. In the first place in my body that I really feel the sadness or really acknowledge that it's there is in my spleen, which is right around your rib cage on the left side of your body. Now, your left side of your body is your feminine side, so it's more your passive side. And that's the whole thing about sadness. It's a very passive emotion. It doesn't move quickly. It moves in its own time. You can't force it. It has lessons for you, but the spleen holds a lot of it. And a lot of the times when we have that energy in our spleen, the feminine side really becomes inactive. We become more masculine. We start to think that we can solve our problems by pushing through life, forcing it, controlling it, being aggressive, being fearful, being passive aggressive, dominating. I think those are the main strategies. I can't think of anything, but we start to take action in those types of fear-based actions, as opposed to, well, if I could just become calm and serene in my spleen, I wouldn't have this necessity to jump out and control, conquer, dominate, destroy the world or my surroundings or people I love. That's a really important part. So as we do this class today, pay attention to your spleen. Pay attention to that left side of the body, right below the rib cage or right along the rib cage, and feel if it feels uncomfortable. If it does feel uncomfortable, this is good news. That means emotions and all of this other stuff is coming up for you. And it's moving, because that's what this class is about, is moving energy. So I have some questions. And we're going to start with this one. What is our resistance to disease, to poverty? In other words, as you see people out there or hear these people and their stories of how they've suffered, how much pain that they experienced, and how overwhelming that feels. Think of those stories that you have heard and read with the coronavirus or another illness. It could be AIDS. It could be somebody having cancer. But it is that experience of an illness that somebody has. And all of a sudden, maybe your first reaction is in fear. Like, oh my God, I don't want that. And maybe it relates back to your spleen and the sadness by saying something like, if I had that, my whole world would shut down. I wouldn't even know who I was. I just know that I wouldn't be me anymore. I would be somebody else, a very sick person. So the reason I bring this up is not to make you sad and depressed. Actually, I kind of want you to be sad and depressed because I want you to get to the energy of what that is. When you look at the energy, you should have no fear towards this stuff because you're looking at it with curiosity. And you just want to feel it in your spleen, because the more that you feel it, the better the clearing will be. So feel what that's like. And it could be just another issue altogether, like I just feel very separate from people, and I'm really sad and depressed about that. Whatever that is for you, can we activate the infinite intensity of consciousness of that so that it can be revealed to us wherever it exists inside of us, but especially in our spleen. Also, maybe in our colon, particularly on our left side. So we are working on the feminine side, the passive side right now. So all of what that energy is, and right now, I highly recommend you be paying attention to that area in your body. We're going into a visceral sensation, so to speak. And even you'll see that I'm not really looking at the camera or looking at y'all's faces when I'm doing these clearings, is because I'm totally focused on my body. And I don't want my eyes to get stimulated by looking at stuff. I want to be feeling inside of me. So it's not rude to be closing your eyes right now. I'd be closing my eyes, but I'm the class leader, so I'm keeping them open. So everything that you've been in resistance and reaction to, this is bad, this is awful, this is terrible, this is the worst. I'm so afraid this will happen to me. And everything you've had that happen to you in your life, you've had those thoughts, you've had experiences, you've seen people have it. Just think about what that is. And everything that you've made secret, hidden, invisible, covert, unseen, unsaid, undisclosed, unacknowledged about those energies, will you allow those secrets to be revealed? And you just say yes to yourself on that one. It's telling your ego to get out of the way and fill your body. Right, wrong, good, bad, pod, all 9 shorts, boys and beyonds. And can you feel that full intensity of that uncomfortable feeling in you? It could be just associated with, I feel really alone. That would be a quality of sadness. Because, you know, we get triggered in a lot of varieties of ways. It's not a straight linear path from one direction to the other. Sometimes it has a variety of experiences that don't even make sense, but that's the way your body has connected your emotional world together. It is what it is. So we really just want to feel this. We really want this sadness to come up. We want that anger to come up. And the fear. It feels like it's a fear of obliteration right now. In other words, you're just not going to exist if this bad thing happens to you. That's the fear. So let's clear it. Pay attention to it right now. Pay attention to whatever is uncomfortable in your body and feel it. Put all your intention there. Let's clear it. All the force and energy you use to hold that in place, will you please destroy and uncreate it all totally and utterly. Right, wrong, good, bad, pod, all 9 shorts, boys, and beyonds. Okay, so you may have felt a lighter sensation happen in your body as it released. It doesn't feel like it's all gone. It just feels like we're just started. So it's just a matter of like the next question to ask, which seems to have come up. What I'm doing is kind of connecting with everybody in the group, even though we're, you know, miles and miles away from each other. It doesn't matter. But they're all coming up. And the one that came up is like, what's our mother's world? How many of you had mothers that were overreactive? Or on the other side, totally suppressive. In other words, you didn't get a wink of emotion out of them. You really didn't know how they felt. They just had a wall or a happy face, like everything's okay, you know. You know, the roof falls and they're going, "Oh, it's gonna be all right, children." They're
Or so
freaking out.
much of their own emotional turmoil.
Huh?
Or so much of their own emotional turmoil.
Yeah, yeah. It's this repressed stuff that's happening, but it's like there's something inside of them that is really sad. So, you know, think we'd like to connect to the infinite intensity of consciousness of our mother's sadness and her reaction to it. The thing is this that there's one thing that you were, cognitively saying, well, the family's okay, and you're like, I want to be the good Bart and be happy and smile all the time for my mom because that makes her feel better. And then there's this other side, the repressed part of me, that's just feeling the doom and gloom that she's actually feeling and not really registering any of that. That's the part that we're connecting to. So all we got to do is ask the body, well, what is the energy of that repressive side that I was picking up from my mom? And if all of a sudden you feel something terribly uncomfortable inside of you, that gives you an idea of the intensity of energy that you were absorbing from her. Because your body wants to show you this stuff. It doesn't want to repress this stuff. It doesn't want to hold on to it. It's like, let this go. That's what it wants to do. So let's let it go. So everything that you've made secret, hidden, invisible, covert, unseen, unsaid, undisclosed about your mother's oppressive energies, her sadness, her fears that everything's going to go wrong, that they're not going to hold it together, they're not going to get to pay the bills, somebody's going to be sick and die, or their husband's going to leave them. All of these are big time fears, and the mom is just like, no, I got to hold the family together. How many of your moms had to hold the family together, and they were just, they had two different worlds going on. So hope that triggered a lot of stuff. We want to connect to the infinite intensity of consciousness of all of those deep emotions and everything that you held back in there and everything that you judged that this is the worst thing possible. Because if you really saw the dark side of that as a kid, it was probably pretty scary. So let's clear it. Pay attention to the place. All the force and energy holding it in place. Will you please destroy and uncreate that totally and utterly? Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, all nine shorts, police, and beyonds. The spleen is a really interesting place because it holds mostly sadness and anger. But sadness is the primary emotion that it holds. And I think most people are just really afraid of sadness. There's a time in my life that I really was afraid of sadness. I didn't want to deal with it. And this is kind of an encouraging thought. Sadness is very natural. In other words, it's the low place in the cycle, but it's a cycle. In other words, it's going to go down, it's going to go up, it's going to go down, it's going to go up. It's always moving like that. But if you're avoiding the sadness, you're most likely not going to have the awareness to reach your peaks. And most people who avoid the sadness are trying to push up to the peaks and avoid the sadness and just stay on the upper end. And what happens is they just stay in the middle all the time. You have to have the lows with the highs. And so, it brings up the question, what does the sadness have to teach me? What is the lesson learned here? And can I really sit with this sadness? You know, that's always the question to ask. Can I really sit with it? And second question, can I learn something from it? What does it have to teach me? When you ask questions, it opens the energy and it opens your awareness to have new insights about it. Questions are great. But let's go back to clearings. Because right now we're kind of in a prickly issue about, you know, what was our mother's shadow side to our sadness and anger. In other words, this is a kind of a dense area for people. And so let's add something to it. How is this energy connected to the matrix of sadness going on right now? Woo. And how much in our unconscious world are we resistant to the matrix of sadness and unconsciousness going on out there? Just like, I don't want to suffer like these people. And you know, and what goes hand in hand with this disease is poverty. So there's also a lot of sadness about poverty. And if you've ever noticed about poverty, at least it's been kind of with me as what I've noticed, is that when people lose all of their money, it's almost like they have a disease. People don't want to be close to them anymore. You know, they're afraid that it's going to happen to them. You know, it's just, you know, a horrible wrongness in a lot of people's eyes. So it's that type of disaster. So all the judgments that you picked up about that were still on your spleen. It doesn't feel really comfortable to me. And that's good. Is this anger? Remember I said the spleen holds anger and sadness? They kind of work together. Anger pulls you out of the sadness. And so people get angry instead of being sad. They push, they force, they control, they become aggressive. All of that stuff happens just to not feel sadness. So all the resistance you have to the matrix of sadness going on right now, because it might take you back to what we've been working on with your mom. It's almost like two different energies going. The repressed part pulls in, and then you're forcing it. You're pushing out to make sure you don't get hurt. Make sure that you keep your distance from this big matrix of fears and sadness going on in our communities and on in our world. So I call it a double bind. It's two energies going in other directions. What happens with that is when they go in opposite directions, you're stuck in the middle and you can't move, energetically speaking. So all the double binds and double binding systems holding that in place, will you occupy the ends, occupy the middle ground, and destroy, don't create that duality, polarity, totally and utterly. Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, on, nine shorts, movies beyond. Well, that moved it. So everything that you've learned from your mom and your dad, your families and your ancestry, is you have to be afraid of sadness, afraid of depression, afraid of bad times, afraid of the illnesses, poverty, because it's bad, and therefore we put up that wall. We push it away energetically and through our actions. Will you please, all the decisions, judgments, compilations, and conclusions you've made to follow that scheme and to vibrate that way and to be like your mom and dad and ancestors and families, will you please revoke, recant, rescind, reclaim, renounce, denounce, destroy, and uproot that totally and utterly? Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, all names, shorts, boys, and beyonds. And you don't have to give me an answer to this next question, but I just want you to contemplate it. When you see a homeless person that is on the street begging, and they're dirty and they look unhealthy and they just look like they're just having a bad time, how much is there a resistance to them in that moment? And I feel it too. It's just like a knee-jerk reaction. And at the same time, there's another side that says, well, I need to have compassion for these people and neutralize it. But I've been trained so long to resist what is unfortunate. Resist people with cancer. Resist people that are extremely sick and poor and are suffering. And that's the big word, suffering. How many walls have you put up? How many times have you suffered in some way, shape, or form? Everything that is, that you've created alignment and agreement with it, and resistance and reaction, which this is a real important one. Will you please revoke, recant, rescind, reclaim, renounce, denounce, destroy, and uproot that totally and utterly? Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, all nine shorts, boys, and beyonds. And everything that you were taught and told and believed and made and created to resist, be afraid of suffering, and which goes down to pain, goes to illnesses. Would you allow yourself to have another paradigm with that, another possibility? Everything that is, right, wrong, good, bad, pot, all nine shorts, boys, and beyonds. Get a drink of water. I gotta let the dog out. I'm back. That's very unprofessional. Oh, well. So I think everybody's body needed to release, and I think my dog's body needed to release too, because she probably went out to pee. So let's do a past life quick clearing with this. How many lifetimes have you suffered that you died suffering? And you made judgments like, this is awful. This is the most terrible thing, you know, to die this way. And it's so terrible to die with such suffering. And you watched other people do it, and you've seen other stories about that. I keep coming up with World War II for some reason. So all those lifetimes that you've done this, had this happen, and watched people have it happen, and you made these judgments of how bad, awful, terrible, vicious it is. All the vows, oaths, swearings, agreements, commitments, fealties, contracts, willingnesses, curses, condemnations, damnations, sentences, implants, and explants, holding that in place throughout all lifetimes, dimensions, realities, relationships. Will you all please revoke, recant, rescind, reclaim, renounce, denounce, destroy, and uproot that totally and utterly? Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, all nine shorts, boys, and beyonds. And everything that y'all have suffered, or no, you've had such pain that you didn't have an answer, you know, and you really suffered with it because you died with it, not having an answer for the pain. And therefore, how many judgments, how many that you made that is the most awful part. And it's just kind of surrounded by fear. All the vows, oaths, swearings, agreements, commitments, fealties, contracts, willingnesses, curses, condemnations, damnations, sentences, implants, explants, holding that in place through all lifetimes, dimensions, and realities. Will you please revoke, recant, rescind, reclaim, renounce, denounce, destroy, and quit that totally and utterly? And you should say yes or no to yourself. You want to let it go or keep that one. Right, wrong, good, bad, POD, all 9 shorts, boys, and beyonds. And how many lifetimes have you had someone you love suffer with such pain? And therefore you suffered. It's almost like for some of you, it just feels like it's somebody in this group, or maybe more than one person, that the suffering you have felt was just too overwhelming. And also, on the other side, is that you wanted to suffer, but you totally repressed it, and you created a lot of energy and defensiveness not to feel it. Those are 2 different points of view. Also, kind of the same thing, too. So, whatever that is for you, that you've watched, that you've witnessed a loved one suffer with such pain, maybe died. And this, in how many vows, oaths, swearings, agreements, commitments, fealties, contracts, willingnesses have you made that that is the most awful, worst thing ever to happen throughout all lifetimes, dimensions, realities, relationships? Will you please revoke, recant, rescind, reclaim, renounce, denounce, destroy, and uncreate that totally and utterly? Right, wrong, good, bad, POD, all 9 shorts, boys, and beyond. And everything that you believe that those who deserved happiness, those who deserved innocence, like young children, should never suffer like that. All the judgments you've made about that throughout all lifetimes, dimensions, realities, relationships, will you please revoke, recant, rescind, reclaim, renounce, denounce, destroy, and uncreate that totally and utterly? Right, wrong, good, bad, POD, all 9 shorts, boys, and beyonds. Whew. So, would you claim on and acknowledge another possibility exists? And it's a really good thing to ask when you really examined everything and you go, I can claim on and acknowledge I can receive something else. I can have a different perspective. This is really important to put out there because it opens you to another energy. So would you claim on and acknowledge other possibilities exist? Right, wrong, good, bad, POD, all 9 shorts, boys, and beyonds. In every story that you believed about your own life, that no possibility exists with certain sadnesses, depressions, illnesses. Whoa. That's a strong one. And that you are just going down a narrow path with that one. There's no other possibilities. You just got to suck it up and bear it. All the resistance and reaction to that and all the alignment and agreement to that, will you please destroy and uncreate that totally and utterly? Right, wrong, good, bad, POD, all 9 shorts, boys, and beyonds. Whew. So, a lot of times when we create a defensive system, and we're going to switch over to the masculine for a little while, which on the other side, opposite of the spleen, is the liver. And the liver really holds a lot of our defensive systems, or the emotions that fuel our defensive systems. And the liver is an extremely strong organ. You know, it's probably the last thing to die in your body. for most people. It's so strong, powerful. So it's a great place to operate our emotions from. And so it's also a great place to clear emotions from. So usually in the liver, emotions operate in triangles or sets of three. And for example, the one I want to work with right now is love, sadness, fear. It's a little triangle there. Love, sadness, fear. It doesn't matter which one's on top. It's just a triangle. So we may have the stability of love that we're pushing out, but as soon as sadness gets set in, we trigger into fear. And we use the fear to push through the reality before we can return to love. You know, they trigger that away. And it also doesn't even have to have a positive emotion with that. It could be sadness, or it could be anger, fear, and shame, for example, or sadness, fear, and anger. Those are more prevalent, actually. So we're going to address sadness, love, and fear. And you know, fear and love have a really interesting duality, because one characteristic about fear is it almost sends us down a very narrow tunnel that we suddenly don't see possibilities. We don't see the lessons. What we do know is we got to conquer the fear. We got to put it out. We got to take action. We got to run away. We got to do something. You know, it just triggers us in those places. And usually it's all about avoiding something. And in this case, sadness. So, and it's really funny in this world right now how many fear-based strategies are happening. You know, we're just popping with fear right now. And it's a lot about, well, we don't want this sad and lonely time where we're having less money, we're staying at home, everything's closed down, everything's shut down, and we could get sick, and that could even shut us down more. And there's just so many fears of that. We have to conquer this. We got to overcome it. And there's not a lot of room for allowance right now of like, well, what does this virus have to teach us? That would be a love strategy. What does society learn from this? How can we expand in different ways? How can we restructure and grow to a possibility that's greater than we ever known before? To me, those things are all popping out. The collective consciousness of the world has advanced a lot in the last 6 weeks. It has. It's amazing when you go into what the consciousness of the world is and start measuring it, which you can. It's a long story and I won't get into it. You start to see that it's been moving upwards. And it's a real gift. That would be the love side. Or, you know, what are the possibilities of me reinventing myself? What else can I learn and evolve to in this time? Those are the great possibilities that love offers. But how much are you believing that I got to get busy, I've got to do something in order that I don't get sick? How much fear is of that? And I'm just going to go down to different fears, you know, and it's almost like, what matrix of fear are you connected to? Are you connected to, and I'm going to go down the list, and if I say one and all of a sudden it kind of jolts in your body, or you get a reaction to it inside of you, that means that one's yours. Okay? So let's see what fear you're reacting to, that I've got to take action. I got to do something, and I got to do it now. You know, it's kind of that, or I'm afraid of something and I don't know what it is, but I don't feel very comfortable. And it's given me this spurring activity of, you know, move, control, dominate, escape, avoid, get angry. You know, it's making me want to do something. So what is that fear for you? Is it fear of annihilation? Fear of obliteration? Fear of degradation? Fear of separation? Fear of ostracization? Fear of non-beingness? Fear of non-sexualness, which would be kind of a playfulness inside of yourself. Fear of fractalization. So several of them read. So all of those matrices that you are connected to, all the specific implants, specific explants that have been activated as we brought this up, and all the positive, all the protocols, factors, and vocal points, and positive negative ions, free radicals, hold that in place. Will you please destroy and uncreate it all totally and utterly? Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, all name, shorts, voids, and beyonds. So in regards to this fear that you have, how many people are you connected to? How many people in your neighborhood? How many people in your family, your home, your friends, your coworkers, people you know from your past lives? How many people are you energetically connected to? All of those energetic lines that are going out, and you're all in that matrix of this fear together. Let's clear them. All the shadow lines, shadow systems, shadow structures, and positive negative ions, free radicals, hold that in place. Will you please destroy and uncreate that totally and utterly? Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, all nine shorts, boys, and beyond. And everything that you've been taught, that if there's something that you're afraid of, or if there's a problem that you got to solve and you feel uncomfortable with it, it challenges you, so to speak, you got to attack it. You got to be aggressive. You got to confront it head on. And how much fear is wrapped up in that? How much is there a very masculine force with that? Is like, you know, we're going to search and find it and conquer it and destroy it or fix it or something, you know. We're going to take it on and take it over. How much force and energy goes out to do that in your body? And everything that you've learned, that that's what you're supposed to do, would you be willing to let that go? Would you be willing to let that fear that drives you to do it that way, that anger that does do it that way, and what's the underlying emotion with that? Most likely sadness or shame. That's the one that you're afraid of. Like, I'm afraid I'm going to be defeated. I'm afraid that I'm going to go into a sad place that I'm not going to come out of. You know, these are fears. They're not rational and logical. You have to remember that. They're illogical, and they can feel so big, but once you really see them as they are, they're not that big. But that's just how they work. So everything that is, how much polarity is that? That pushing out, and you're afraid, and you're trying to avoid something you're afraid of. Two different energies going in opposite directions. All the double binds and double binding systems, Holding those in place, will you pocket pod the ends, pocket pod the middle ground, destroy and upgrade that totally and utterly. Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, pot, all night, shorts, boys, and beyonds. It's so much in our society, particularly if you're American. If you got a problem, you defeat it. You conquer it. You take the challenge and take it on, you know, and it has a real aggressive overtone with it, but more importantly, it's a more masculine perspective. Whereas the feminine side would be, I can have allowance of this problem. My solution will show up really easily when I'm an allowance and I open my full consciousness to it. You know, there's a certain ease to it. So everything that you have been taught, the masculine approach, everything that you duplicated that from your father, everything that you duplicated that from your mother, and all the systemic duplication creation systems, holding that in place, and the positive ions and free radicals that hold that in place, will you please destroy and uncreate that totally and utterly. Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, pot, on nature, which boys and beyonds. And on the counterbalance of that, how much did you agree that they were very wrong for doing so? And you resented it for them, and you have anger in that aspect. Everything that is, will you please destroy and uncreate that totally and utterly. Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, pot, on nature, which boys and beyonds. And everything that you've created that they were right to do that, will you please destroy and uncreate that totally and utterly. Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, pot, on nature, which boys and beyonds. It's funny, resistance and reaction and alignment and agreement are judgments, basically. But they really, it's what that lock us into the vibration of any person or situation. For example, if we're really saying, I hate the way my father ridicules me, I just hate it, of course you're in resistance and reaction. And most likely, if you don't become conscious about all of that, you're going to probably either be doing that behavior or you're going to be doing something exactly opposite. And you know, and we become like our parents, mainly because we judged it. We judged them as wrong, or we judged us as wrong, and we can't see beyond that judgment. And so the way to get out of it is be an allowance of it. It's like, well, my father did it that away, and I can allow myself to have my anger at him. I can allow myself to, you know, be seduced by that power. It's really okay. I can really see what it is. So, and I bring up allowance because that's so critical if we want to step out of this sadness, depression, fear matrix, you know. And the real crucial part about this, and some of you who've been doing these classes with me have probably heard this concept before, is like, what are you afraid of with this virus? What are you afraid of becoming really sad and depressed about? You know, what's that feeling? You know, what's that projection? In other words, the thoughts that you have like, oh, I don't want any of this to happen. I'm so scared of getting it and having all of that pain, or getting it and dying, you know, whatever that is. And all of a sudden your wall comes up and you're a non-allowance because you don't want that. And all of a sudden you're spending a lot of energy keeping that wall up. So think about what you can allow of this virus in your life. You know, and I'm talking about the fears. You know, I don't think anybody of us want to get sick, but we don't have to be in fear of it and have a judgment about it. It's just like, no, I think I'm going to do some prudent measures not to have it, and I'm going to be okay in total allowance of what's happening. with the virus. So get that feeling about what that is for you, of your fears, of what you're in total resistance to. In other words, when you think about it, something feels really uncomfortable in your body. You know, I've had to do this with a lot of things in my life I didn't like. And I get the feeling of what it is in my body. So all the resistance and reaction you have to it, and alignment and agreement to it, will you please destroy and uproot that totally and utterly. Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, pot, on, nine, shorts, boys, and beyonds. Now that's one aspect to it, but the other aspect of it is receiving that fear. And this is the most important part. Doesn't mean that you're having to invite it into your life. I mean, it's kind of like I'm not really crazy about the idea of being poor, but I'm not afraid of being poor. And therefore, I have allowance of poverty. You know, and and all of a sudden when I have the allowance, all my walls go down and I'm not sending energy to that limitation. It's just like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to have that. You know, so think about that worst fear of what could happen to you. And I want to ask you this question. Would you claim on and acknowledge that you can allow that fear of blank to come into your life and no longer resist it anymore? And that's it. Just feel what that's like. Everything that is, right, wrong, good, bad, pot, pot, all, nine, shorts, boys, and beyonds. The thing with me is like, you know, as I watch the news and stuff, there's just so many different stories, so much confusion right now, you know, and it's really funny because I have a housemate right now who has a totally different perspective to this virus than I do. I mean, I prefer to stay at home and I wear my mask to the stores and stuff like that. And she's like, I don't want to wear no fucking mask. I'm still going to work. Yes, I'll wash my hands and keep clean and be careful, but I'm going to be out in the world. I am not going to let this slow me down. I have to work. I am not going to not work. So it's really taught me all the points of view here and all the confusion, and that nobody really has so-called the right answer to this, I don't believe. I had to find that place of not being fear of that confusion and be an allowance of the confusion. And so for me, what I had to do was say, everything that I have created, that fear, that in this confusion, the worst is going to happen. Everything's going to fall apart, because that's the fear for me. I really defined it for what it is. And then I think about, well, what would be the worst that happened to me? You know, my pensions go away and business goes away. And for me, it's about being destitute. It's a feeling of destitution. It's not dying. That's not what I'm afraid of. It's destitution. So I just, for me, I just claim on and acknowledge I can receive it. And all of a sudden, I have looked that fear right in the eye and said, I'm not going to resist you anymore. I can have you in my life. It means that I'm not going to attract it. As a matter of fact, I'll attract less of it because it's my resistance that creates the attraction for it to come in my life in the first place. And this is why it's so important to receive it and give allowance to it, whatever the fear is for you. So as you think about this class, that's one pearl of wisdom that I hope you can take home. is see what you're really afraid of. So, any questions? I'm not reading my chats right now because I'm trying to concentrate on this. So if you're sending me a message with the chat expecting me to read it, I'll read them at the end of the class. You're going to have to get off your, you're going to have to unblock really because, and speak, because I can't read and speak at the same time and comprehend all of that. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming. I'm still doing private sessions. I still may do an abuse class on Zoom. So if anybody wants to do an abuse class, let me know. I did one 2 months ago and I have a small group that says I want to work on abuse issues again, but we've never done it on Zoom. Zoom requires you to a slightly different skill set when you work with groups, and an abuse class is, of course, very personal and intense. So I've been hesitant, but I'd like to proceed forward and do that. I will be in Austin for this month that I know of. I'm waiting for the French government to open their borders, allow people to fly in, and then I'm flying to France. At that point, I don't know if I'll continue this format of Zoom classes. Who knows? I might. But I still want to do them as long as we're in this crisis as a means of service. So please keep coming. When I do these 12 o'clock classes, they're going to be free, and I'm happy to serve. Also, I'll have this as a recording. I'll put it out on Facebook, on my personal page, and on my page called Dancing with the Infinite Body Consciousness. That's Dancing with the Infinite Body Consciousness. So please share it. You know, it serves other people, it serves me, and hopefully it'll serve you by sharing it. So if there's not any other questions, I just want to say thank you and wish y'all all the best. I'll say goodbye to you right now.
Have a wonderful afternoon. Love you so much.
Love you too,
Thank you, Bart.
Aki. All right. Thanks for
Bart.
coming.
Thanks, Bart. Don't forget to
Thank
read
you.
the chats.
Sending love.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you next week.